Right now, let's turn our attention toward the telephones, and Dr. Duke Pesta is on the line, assistant professor of English, University of Wisconsin, Oshkosh, and has been a very vocal and high-profile opponent of Common Core, and he's going to tell you why, and he's going to educate some of us who are not all that familiar with Common Core a bit, too. Doctor, good morning to you.
Hi, how are you today?
We're doing very well. Also want to steer people toward YouTube. You are quite well represented on YouTube, are you not?
Well, a lot of those videos were made by moms and dads with camcorders, so I can't claim credit for them, but there's a lot of stuff out there.
And you're also coming to Rockford on Friday, too, which we'll talk more about a little later. Hoffman House, 6:30 Friday 4. Speaking on the topic, fighting Common Core. And actually, if you go to our website, 1440WROK.com, and just search for your name, Duke Pesta, in the search box, you'll see a post with more info about the event on Friday. Let's start from the start. There are a lot of people who have heard the phrase Common Core. There are a lot of people who have heard about some of the opposition to it, and they don't know why, or they don't know what it's about. So let's start from the beginning. Common Core, what's it about? Where did it come from?
Hugely complicated question, but the way I like to begin these talks is by quoting the Chicago Teachers Union, one of the most liberal progressive teachers union in the whole country, and Chicago is demanding out of it. And the Chicago Teachers Union basically defines Common Core, and I agree with them, as a overreach of the federal government into state and local educational decisions. Also, it is a collaboration between the federal government and a very small group of crony capitalist companies who stand to reap billions from the tests and the assessments and the curriculum and the textbooks that come along with Common Core.
Yeah, that's one angle on things that people might not notice is the underlying financial motives that are there.
Absolutely. When we look at the person who paid for it initially, Bill Gates, and we look at the people who wrote the standards, all of whom are utterly connected to the federal government and utterly unaccountable to the taxpayer, when we look at the people behind this, it is really kind of shocking that the newspapers aren't demanding to know what they stand to gain. I tell people all the time, if instead of Bill Gates putting up $4 billion for Common Core, if it had been the Koch brothers, can you imagine the consternation? I think Harry Reid's head would explode all over the Senate floor. But because it is Gates, no one's asking the question.
Dr. Duke Pesta with us talking Common Core. Now when the Common Core was first rolled out, there was a pretty good level of acceptance of the standards. But we've seen more states delay, more states opt out as it has begun to be implemented, as people have begun to understand what it's all about. What exactly are these states and the governors beginning to see in Common Core?
Well, when you say that the states were generally accepted, the standards were generally accepted 3 and 4 years ago when they were rolled out. That's true, but that's also because nobody had seen them in practice.
Mm-hmm.
The fact is that the vast majority of American states, well over 40, received Common Core not because they asked for it, but simply because they took federal race to the top money. Back in 2008 and 2009, President Obama created the Federal Race to the Top program, which basically gave federal dollars to the state's Departments of Education. And the only provision for taking Race to the Top money was any state that took Race to the Top money had to accept the Common Core state standards when they were finally written. So in other words, basically 44 states in the Union were bribed to take a set of curriculum standards that they had not even seen. And what's changed between now and 2 years ago is we're beginning to see them work their way through the schools, and it's a disaster. Governors, there's over 300 pieces of legislature in 40 different states now to curtail, to remove Common Core. Even big progressive teachers unions in New York and Chicago have begun to reject the standards, and you've got in the last 6 months states like Indiana, Oklahoma, South Carolina, now Louisiana and Missouri are moving that way to get rid of it. This is a big problem. Then whatever acceptance there was came with a big check and not a lot of knowledge. Well, the money's spent, and now people are waking up to what it is, and they're not happy.
So, Doctor, it would seem to me that the next move for proponents would be to try to find another big bucket of money.
Well, money is the force that drives most bad decisions in this country. I think that the American people are starting to realize that national health care, for instance, isn't going to save anybody money. It's going to cost them. And so you're right. In fact, that's the reason some states are hesitant to get out of Common Core. The money is so sweet coming from the federal government. But we know, we've seen this historically, right? When the federal government wants to take something over, they initially flood the states with money. And then when it's dug deep, they pull back and the states are on the hook. It's been estimated that in 5 years, states are going to be on the hook for Common Core, the continued implementation of it, to to the tune of billions and billions of state dollars once the federal money dries up, and it always does.
Dr. Duke Pesta with us, talking Common Core. It's Riley and Scott on WROK. He's in town Friday, 6:30, Hoffman House, Fighting Common Core Round 2. That's his, speaking on that topic. You can find out, again, a little more on our website, 1440WROK.com. Type in his name in the search box, or go to eventbrite.com and enter Common Core. The event should pop up to reserve tickets as well. It's a free event. Free will offering will be asked for, but you can reserve those tickets in advance. You're kind of talking about this, Doctor. Right now, the parents have the ability to control some of the educational standards through local school boards, local schools, and that value that parents locally have the ability to influence those topics and those educational standards locally. That's what's going to be taken away through the Common Core standards, right?
Yeah. Once they get fully implemented, that cannot help but be true. The fact is that every metric shows that kids learn best when you have a committed parent, a disciplined child, and an effective teacher. That is the best way to educate kids. Nothing else matches it. And when you look at things like Common Core, this is 180 degrees removed from that. The teachers are handcuffed, the dictates, the standards, and even much of the curriculum, the textbooks are coming down from the national level. And what you're getting is the inverse of that. And Common Core, the shocking thing about Common Core is that unlike No Child Left Behind, which was the previous iteration of this, Common Core makes that next big leap, and this really begins the process of fully federalizing all of this, which means you want to opt your kid out of something, you got to, right now in your schools, if there's a book you don't want your kid to read or a movie clip that you want them to see, you can go to your schools and more or less you can opt them out, the kids. But what's going to happen when every aspect of the curriculum becomes Common Core aligned and they are all geared to the national test? How do you opt your kid out of something that's national? You're going to have to call 1-800 Department of Education. How much Muzak do you think you're going to have to listen to before Arnie Duncan?
Well, as long as there's some Kenny G, it might be okay.
If they weren't Kenny G, and it wouldn't be all that horrible. Spending some time with Dr. Duke Pesta, he will speak in depth about Common Core 6:30 Friday night, Hoffman House Convention Center, 7550 East State Street. And you should prepare to spend a couple of hours with Dr. Pesta. He's got a lot of information, and you're going to enjoy learning it. Tell you something I haven't enjoyed. I've seen a couple of the videos, including one that more famous, where this girl goes into the fetal position crying over a math question that even has her dad banging his head against the wall.
Yeah, that's one of the things that the people, when the Common Core Committee did their work, they actually invited a math expert and an English expert to validate the standards. They brought them in. These two professors, who were the only experts that were asked to look at the standards, they both voted no. They rejected them entirely. And the math professor said, the guy by the name of Professor Jim Milgram, a retired math professor at Stanford University, Milgram's the guy who did most of the math for the Apollo moonshot in the late 60s. So you're talking a serious guy. And he said, and I quote, "It is a joke to think that Common Core math will prepare our kids for college-level math or even for STEM careers." So this is untested math. And the way they do it is so needlessly convoluted that the main feature of it seems to be that moms and dads cannot help their kids with their homework.
Can you walk us through that a little bit? I mean, I've seen some of the videos. Riley has too, perhaps others have as well. We're accustomed to how we learn math in school. What is this new way? It's like grouping by tens, and then it's very convoluted, as you said. Can you kind of walk us through a bit about how that's being taught now?
Well, it's being taught different ways in different schools through different Common Core textbooks, but the premise is always the same. And, as Professor Milgram points out, different kids learn in different ways. We all understand that. But the problem is that the Common Core math prohibits doing math the way you and I learned how to do it. So it's not like kids are being taught the very intuitive, simple way that you and I learned how to put numbers on top of each other, stack them and add them, divide them, multiply them. If they were doing that along with trying to incorporate some of this other pedagogy, maybe we could see it. But the fact is that they're completely denying kids the ability in the class and for the test to do the traditional math and forcing them to learn this very obfuscated and complicated way. The only way I can think to describe it, to tell you the truth, is this is social justice math. The fact is that math for kids in kindergarten through high school, the numbers haven't changed, the formulas haven't changed, the problems haven't changed in 2,500 years. So what are we doing when we keep throwing all that out and bringing in new textbooks? And, of course, the textbook companies love that because they're selling schools more stuff. But the fact is that all you're paying for is the numbers. If math hasn't changed, all you're paying for ultimately is all of this sociological experimenting on our kids, all of this politics and nonsense and all these twisted ways of doing things that can be done more simply. The only argument for a paradigm like this is that you're trying to drive a wedge between kids and their parents, and you're trying to make learning something the privileged province of the classroom that you don't want any outside help or input. Again, we're back to the federal control issue of this.
Looking at a couple of other notes, according to a report in the Wall Street Journal August of this year, math standards will put U.S. 7th graders 2 years behind their counterparts. Berkeley math professor emerita Marina Ratner opines Common Core is, quote, making math education even worse, echoing the sentiment of Jim Milgram that you mentioned before.
Right, Common Core math it's one of the great lies of Common Core from the people who promote it, is that the standards have been internationally benchmarked. It's just garbage. In 5 years of trying to get the Common Core people to release the data if they did do any testing, they won't. Professor Milgram on the validation committee, he said, show me the math you did. For the entire time the professor sat on the committee with the Common Core people, they never provided a single shred of evidence. As Milgram points out, at the very youngest grades, kids are doing math that they're physically and intellectually incapable of doing. But with every year that passes, by the time the kids get into upper middle school, they're doing way too little math, so that by the time they graduate high school, they are not even ready for what kids 10 years ago were ready for in college. That's how bad it is.
Science and social studies, though, those seem to be fairly controversial subjects about what might be included in Common Core. When do those standards get announced?
They're on the way. English and math are in the school. Science is coming, and so is social studies. And the social studies, the history, that's making big news right now. Most people don't realize that the man who oversaw the writing of the standards, David Coleman, he is the architect of the Common Core. No sooner did he write the standards than he immediately switched over and became the CEO of the College Board, where the same guy who orchestrated the standards is now transforming the SATs and the ACTs to conform to his Common Core standards. And David Coleman now is rewriting the AP exams our kids take to get into college, including the AP history. If your audience wants to get a sense of how bad the coming history standards are, type the word APUSH, A-P-U-S-H, into Google, and you will find the entire AP history curriculum, which is shockingly anti-American, it's anti-capitalist. The Founding Fathers are compared to terrorists. The entire history curriculum is one that views America through the lens of being a racist, sexist country. The idea that America is a land of freedom or opportunity or exceptionalism is completely removed from the curriculum.
Well, that should make for controversy-free homework sessions at home, I would think.
Well, there is no controversy as long as you conform to the current government's view of the way the history is. We'll all get along great. Why do you think they call it Common Core? As long as we all commonly agree that what they tell you is the right thing, then we'll have no problem.
Dr. Duke Pesta with us here in another minute or two. It's Riley and Scott here on WROK. So as people come out Friday, as people learn more about Common Core and they perhaps want some action, perhaps want their state to withdraw, you're up in Wisconsin. We're here in Illinois. Who makes the final decisions on this? Does it go straight to the governor's office in a number of these states?
No, the legislature has a lot of control, and that's the only real avenue to push this back. Get your state and local legislators, the people who work for you immediately in your district, on board with repealing and fighting this. Obviously, ultimately, governors will have to sign off on getting rid of it if it gets that far. But if you can get enough of your state and local people to fight this, and, there's no reason, certainly, even Chicago, which obviously is a big problem for you in Illinois, but even the Chicago Teachers Union is militantly opposed to the standards now. So we're dealing with a situation that has angered people both on the left and right, and how often does that happen? And that means there should be enough political capital if we can get our legislators' minds turned around on this to be able to remove it.
Dr. Duke Pesta with us. As we mentioned, Friday he'll be at Hoffman House, 6:30, free event. But you can reserve tickets in advance through eventbrite.com. You can enter comment in the search box there. Or our website also has some information about how to reserve your seats for Friday's event. You gave us a few tips on where to find more info. Are there other places you recommend for people who might want to investigate further?
Well, we have a website that if you go to it, it's free. Scroll down to the bottom. You can access the Common Core button and all sorts of free information. That website is FPE, Frank Paul Edward, FPEUSA.org.
Dr. Duke Pesta, thanks a lot for your time. You're fighting the good fight. We appreciate it. We hope you fill it up on Friday at the Hoffman House, too.
Thank you so much. I look forward to it, and Illinois needs to push this back. Thank you very much.
Have a great day.